What's going on, guys? In the works. I know, mind blown. It's 2021 and In the Works is making a Battlefield 2042 video. What are the odds? And if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen me chattering a bit about the game and some of the highs and lows of it. But to start this off, we're going to watch this fun little clip. This is from a few weeks ago, but I think it sums up my experience with the game so far. It's the classic spawn on a squad mate. He drives a car, gets out, and I'm like, okay, great. Now I'm just under this bridge, and so I take it and leave, and then I get this message. Man, he got me pretty good, guys. I gotta say, I uninstalled for a few days after this because I was just so burned by that comment. But all jokes aside, here we are playing Battlefield 2042. I mean, it's been out almost a month now since early access. I've been playing it on and off for a bit. I went pretty hard on release and I had a pretty good time, but I was having a pretty difficult time getting it to run smoothly on my 1080 because like everyone else in the world, it's been very difficult to find upgrade cards, so I'm still rocking my 1080 Ti, which should be more than enough to run this game. If you're following this game in any sort of way, you know that there's a lot of performance issues with it, and we've all had our fair share of like weird hiccups and just hit detection and stuff like that. Like, I think we probably all can admit that we've experienced it. I mean, look at this right here. Not that I'm very good at this game. I would actually say out of all the Battlefield games, I've been really bad at this game. I don't know if it's me just being rusty, because I didn't really play Battlefield 5, I'll be honest with you guys. And before we get too deep into this, that is one thing that, I think I owe a lot of people is like what's been going on. I know a lot of the old crew kind of disappeared, and, I made a video right before Battlefield 1. And my intentions, and I'll be completely honest with you, my intentions were to do Battlefield 1 stuff. I kind of took a break there at the end of Battlefield 4, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to reset for the next one. Then they announced Battlefield 1, and at first I thought it sounded really good. And I get a lot of, I saw the comments, people asking me, like, where have you been? I mean, I still get them. I literally get them every single day. Twitter comments, you look at some of my old videos, there's probably one on each video. I had probably about a dozen Battlefield 1 videos made, ready to go. In my old format, kind of my old style. I wasn't really looking to deviate from that formula much, just because like I enjoyed doing that. I mostly always did this as for fun because I loved Battlefield and I just loved, shooters in general. But if you were close to EA around the time, I mean, there was a lot of controversy going into Battlefield 4. You guys know that I flew to London to do the Battlefield Showdown thing. That was sponsored by EA, so like clearly I had done sponsored events, but it was during the time when like the community managers and EA and all that stuff it was just getting a little bit much. I mean, you basically had paid people doing like paid reviews. And I'm not trying to like poop on anyone. There's tons of content creators who I'm not a huge fan of. Unfortunately, I think that's just, they did what they needed to do to survive, and it's really not in my place to call them out on that. I mean, that's kind of just what YouTube has become, especially with like the EA stuff and whatnot. What did they used to call that? Like the insider or whatever. Anyways, that's beyond the point. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I ultimately was like, you know what? I just can't do it. I just don't feel like doing content for Battlefield 1. I actually thought it was an okay game, but it just wasn't Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. I don't think that Battlefield 1 was a bad game. I think that it had its moments, but it just didn't have the same sort of octane I was looking for in a shooter. So I was having a really tough time, like beyond like those first 12 videos I made. I never posted them, obviously. I just made a decision that, I'm going to continue to just kind of be in my own little corner, and if I get the urge, I'll do it. Obviously, Battlefield 5 came out. I didn't do anything for that. I did not like Battlefield 5. In the end, it ran a lot better, but in the beginning, it was just an absolute just cluster. I mean, it was awful. So that's kind of just like the last like two Battlefields, just to kind of wrap up where I've been, sort of my thought process on it. There's a lot that went into it. I've been focusing on just like life, career, stuff like that. I've still been playing games, and like I said, I've been active on Twitter, so if you ever need to reach me, I've got that. I've also got like a little side YouTube project that I work on where I do a lot of like fishing and kayaking and outdoors type stuff on there, which I'll link in the bottom if anyone wants to come over there and subscribe. I think it's only got like 2 subscribers, so it's actually kind of embarrassing, but I always do this for fun. Like I've never really tried to make doing Battlefield a career, so And that's sort of the TLDR. I don't want to get too deep into it because I could probably ramble for an hour. But I mean, if people have questions, you can always leave a comment. I'll probably respond to them, or tweet. Whatever you prefer. But let's talk about 2042. That's probably why most of you guys are here, just to see what my thoughts on it, kind of where I'm at with it. I have a pretty good chunk of playtime into it. I think I'm level 50, which isn't really that high. I mean, there's plenty of people that are like level 100, but I have put ample time into this. I've been playing since day one of this release. I did play a lot of the beta, and I could say with a pretty strong conviction that I think the biggest problem with 2042 is that it suffers from being an EA game. And that's not me taking a shot at EA more than it's just being honest. I think EA has become notorious for these games that just launch unfinished. And it's not really the support they get after launch or, the content of the game or stuff like that. It's the unfinished product. I mean, look at the clip in front of you. It's just filled and riddled with bugs. Oftentimes it feels like every launch gets worse and worse. If you've been playing Battlefield for a while, with the exception of maybe Battlefield 1, every launch has kind of just been a disaster. And you can even look at stuff like Anthem. Anthem is an EA game, which if you played that on release, oh my gosh, it was awful. Performance issues, connection issues, stuff like that. So EA has a really bad track record with that. And it's unfortunate because they make good games when they put the effort in. It just sometimes takes them, months after release to get the finished product where it's got to be. I mean, if you look at Battlefield 5, I didn't really particularly care for it, mostly because of the content model. But the game runs well, and I would say that in its current state, Battlefield 5 feels a lot like it should have launched as, which is unfortunate. And that gets me to my main point here with Battlefield 2042, because I feel like we just kind of got a shell of a Battlefield game. Like, the idea on paper is great. The themes are great. Honestly, when it plays well, it plays well. But it's missing the magic that 3 had, even 4. 4 I don't think was as good as 3. But something about this it's just lacking. It's like they knew what they wanted, but they just didn't have the resources and time to kind of flesh it out. Now, I bet you if we came back here in 7 months and took a relook at this video, we might be like, okay, well, it's in a great spot now, which, is probably what's going to happen. But on paper, this feels much more like a really early access game, more so than a finished AAA title. And that's unfortunate, because I think it did have the potential to be as good as 3 and 4. I still think that, if you're a fan of the series, there's hope that the game can get better, because a lot of the core elements are good. But the early fixes, I'll give them credit for that too. They have made some pretty good fixes, but it almost feels like Battlefield went a direction that nobody really wanted. They just started adding things into the game that didn't really cater to the core gameplay element. I think, you've probably watched plenty of Battlefield videos complaining about the specialist model. I have to agree, it's awful. And I don't say that just to get on the bandwagon. I want the 4 classic classes back. I miss my old recon. I miss my old engineer. The specialist system just completely removes me from the game. And what I mean by that, it just feels so weird to be out there in this like war-ravaged world fighting each other, but then you've got like these quirky personalities. You've got these voice lines, and you've got these people being like, yeah, let's go out there and fight and, kick some butt. And it's just a little weird. Battlefield's always been a little bit of a more serious title, and I don't fault them for wanting to make it appeal to like that younger audience. But to me, it kind of feels like they pulled the old Battlefield players out of it. Like, they made all these changes that didn't necessarily need to be made. They bumped the player count up, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth here in a sec. But they just made all these changes. The revive mechanic, I think, was actually a great change. And what a fail-nade right there. They changed the way revives work. But then, they took away 3D spotting. Great. That's something we all complained about in the old games. But guess what? They added motion sensors. And you notice I'm using motion sensors because guess what? If you want to compete in this game, you better be using some motion sensors. Which I think a lot of people get annoyed with. I will give them credit. They have tweaked it a little bit so it's not so spammable. So that's great. But if you're a really aggressive player, I have found personally that this is a very tough game to play. You're not going to see those big long kill streaks that you used to see with 128 players. It's just too many. And I know they've released the 64 player modes here recently, and I think that's a great change, which kind of shows, okay, well, maybe 128 was a mistake, which I personally think it was. There's just so many variables now when you have that many players that every time you think you're like gonna start killing people, guess what? There's another person right there, and it's just too many. You know, when you have these magazine sizes, you're kind of limited on how many people you can kill. Not to mention, it kind of throws off the balance of, you know, vehicle versus infantry, rock, paper, scissors that you had in the older games. And speaking of the older games, I think one of the most redeeming parts of 2042, and a mode that you see me playing right now, and I've found myself playing a lot, is just the classic game modes in Portal. I think Portal actually has huge potential, and you're starting to see it. They've released a lot of new stuff, especially this week. They even have some Christmas themed stuff, which we'll take a look at here in a sec. But playing this makes me really be like, oh, okay, well, 2042 on paper really has the potential to be a good game because you can go back and play Battlefield 3. But then you look at it and it's like, well, there's just as many guns in the Portal Battlefield 3 as the base 2042 almost. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it feels like that. And that's one of the reasons why I find 2042, the base game, to be a little frustrating, because it just doesn't have the depth of the old Battlefield games that we've come to love. And that's really frustrating to me, because when you look at Battlefield 2042, you look at the weapons, there's just no variety. It's just wild to me that they thought, well, let's ship this game with like 3 options per thing. So that's one of the things that I've really, you know, kind of been frustrated with. But then, like I said, the Portal mode is a redeeming quality of Battlefield 2042 because it gives them a lot of room to change it up. And right now, this is the Christmas event that they just started, where it's like elves versus Santa or something crazy like that. But I think events like this are a lot of fun, especially when it's like a base game mode that anyone can queue up with. And the point of this game is that, you know, it's kind of like a survival game where the elves are the zombie and you are this Santa wielding this giant machine gun, which I think they call like the Christmas wrapper or something like that. And it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. You can only hip fire, but guess what? It is a ton of fun. And I think game modes like this really show the potential of the Portal system. Like, I think it has the potential to make or break Battlefield 2042 for the long run. Because, you know, I can sit here on YouTube as a washed up YouTuber from 2014 complaining about the lack of weapons in Battlefield 2042. But the reality is it's really in EA's hands. I mean, and I guess to a certain extent DICE as well, but they have the blueprint here. It's here. You know, they can pretty much do whatever they want with this mode. They've showed it. It's just up to them to sort of execute on it. And I've been having a lot of fun with just sort of the goofier game modes. But I think that kind of reflects the fact that, you know, we're having more fun with right here on Nose Hair Canals playing this goofy game mode than we are with the base game. And I know I'm not the only person that feels that way. I find myself playing the Battlefield 3 modes a lot in Portal just because that's what I enjoy. And it's really refreshing to have a updated experience on these maps. Because I think these maps, you know, some of the Battlefield 4 maps which aren't on Portal, you know, that's not to say it can't be on Portal eventually. Some of the Battlefield 4 maps would be great, but alas, one of the biggest weaknesses of 2042 are the maps. Tell you what, if I have to play Hourglass one more time, I might uninstall. That's how much I hate that map. So for all the weaknesses that 2042 has, I do think there's hope on the horizon. I've noticed the player count, though, is dropping very fast in this game. I think people are just not willing to stick it out while DICE and EA figure out how to make the game more enjoyable. These game modes, like you see here, are a great start because it keeps people engaged. It keeps you, you know, wanting to come back to do these holiday events, to test out these new game modes and just have a good time, because that's what Battlefield's about, having a good time. So where does that really leave us with this game? I've rambled on here for a good 14 minutes, sort of just talking about it. Well, I definitely think on paper, this has some major potential to be a really good game. Whether or not it can get to that point, we'll see. I mean, they were managed to salvage Battlefield 5 in my opinion, but I just don't see how they're ever going to get a game as solidly built as Battlefield 3. And I just don't see how they're going to have a game that's sort of built on the foundation of Battlefield 3 with Battlefield 4 2042 takes a lot of steps back. I mean, it became more of that almost younger generation of shooter, and I don't say that to like insult younger players. I'm saying that in the sense that, you know, you've got games like PUBG, Fortnite, um, you know, Apex, which is an EA title, so it's a great example. It caters to a younger audience with the specialist system. It's a little bit more faster paced. 128 people is it's just too much. I think that is one of the major things that sort of ruined this game from the gate. They've introduced the new game mode, so that kind of addresses it a little bit, but they did say it's there for a limited amount of time, so that does worry me a little bit. But ultimately, I've had fun moments with this game. You know, beyond the lack of weapons, beyond sort of the hit registration performance issues, which for a lot of titles, if they weren't a AAA shooter or titles with a huge fan base like Battlefield, probably wouldn't have been given a second chance. So that's one of the big advantages that EA and DICE have, is that the Battlefield community can be pretty forgiving. I mean, we sat through some major problems over the years, and you know, eventually I'll give them credit, DICE and EA did find a way to fix a lot of the games, but it just is so exhausting to be a Battlefield fan, to go through all this constantly, every single launch. And I think that's one of the things that really frustrated me with the series in general, and sort of pushed me towards, you know, taking a step back and being like, okay, you know, you're investing a lot of effort into this thing, and it's becoming almost commercialized where, you know, if you want to make it in the community, you almost have to be on EA's side, but EA is pushing out all this stuff that's unfinished, and it just felt really disingenuous to go out there and be like, oh, this is a great game, when in reality is they needed to really fix a lot of the problems with the game. And if you talked bad about it, guess what? You got removed from the program, or you got blacklisted. I know a lot of good friends in the Battlefield community. In fact, one of the bigger Battlefield YouTubers, I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about, got sort of like blacklisted / shadow banned because they were critical of the game, which is mind-blowing to me because, you know, they've been putting out content for like a decade. So they've been around a while. I think that since has been resolved, but at the time, to me, that was really eye-opening. I'm like, okay, well, if it can happen to them, there's no way that, you know, 60,000 sub InTheWorks is going to ever make it past where he's at, because, you know, you either go with it or you don't. And if you don't, typically you get left behind on a lot of the promotions and stuff that kind of made the whole thing viable. So yeah, that frustrated me a lot. That's, you know, alluding back to what I talked about in the first half of the video, that was one of the reasons why I took a step back. And it just wasn't a huge desire to make content for some of the games. I think 2042 feels a lot more with what I was looking for out of a Battlefield game, which excites me. I find myself playing it, you know, at least a little bit every day, so I will give it credit for that. I see myself continuing to play it for a while. I've got it running pretty well on my PC, which is surprising because if you were looking at my tweets from launch day, I was struggling to get it to play. I still struggle to get it to run at a good FPS, which even after that update that was supposed to fix it a little bit, it didn't really get it 100%, but I've made some personal tweaks that gets it to run a little bit better, aka like forcing the GPU to actually use the GPU instead of the CPU. That was a nightmare. Which, if you're having that problem with high CPU issue, feel free to message me because I know the perfect fix for it. But yeah, you know, we've gone almost 20 minutes now, sort of rambling on. This is the style of video I guess I've always sort of done. I just wanted to chat, you know, I just wanted to kind of touch base on this game. Maybe I make a couple more videos. I can see myself making a couple more. Whether or not I become like, you know, the old school days where I'm like producing that sort of content, it's just tough. I mean, it's tough to sit there and be like, okay, let's do, you know, gun comparisons and stuff like that. I guess the tougher part too is a lot of the people I used to roll with just don't play it anymore. And it was really kind of hard to fault them for that because a lot of the product we were getting given which just wasn't up to snuff. Like, I look at my Origin friends list and maybe like 2 or 3 of them still play the game. And none of the YouTubers I used to run with play it really, you know. We've got like Snoov is over there doing the fishing stuff, which is great because he's absolutely killing it on there, which is great to see. You know, Sweat took a break. So all the old gang is just kind of scattered all over the place. You know, people have grown up, people have aged out of doing YouTube. But here I am, you know, making a video in 2021 here, almost Christmas, and you know, I think really what inspired me to make this video was looking at the comments on some of my old videos, and I was like, okay, you know, it feels kind of bad that I let this opportunity slip away, but at the same time, I was doing it for fun. I was doing it for you guys. Honestly, I started doing it for fun back when I was doing like live streams, back when live streams are just, they were new. Like there was just something that you didn't see a lot of people doing, and we were doing it for fun. And I mean, we used to have a blast in Battlefield 3 doing live streams. I mean, man, the DLC in that game was just so good. But yeah, I was like looking at the comments, everyone giving me love. You know, of course, there's that one people saying, "Oh, he died," which you know, you're always gonna see that sort of thing. But yeah, I guess I don't really have a great way to end this video. I'll make a couple more. I will promise you that. I know I said I would make Battlefield 1 videos and I didn't do it. But maybe we'll do like some live games or something like that. I think that might be fun. Maybe I'll see if I can inspire some of the old crew to get back together. But if you made it this long, thanks for being there. Thanks for taking the time to even click on this video after almost like 5.5 years of nothing. Because this was an important part of my life. You know, I spent the better part of like 7 or 8 years doing YouTube content, so it does matter to me. But like I said earlier, if you're interested in subscribing to my other channel, I'll link it in the description too. I'm doing, you know, it might not interest you, but you know, you could always come over there and see what I'm doing, just to get another peek into life if you're ever curious. But yeah, 2042 is kind of in the middle of the road for me. That's kind of where I'm at with it, and we'll see how it shapes up in the future. So, InTheWorks, signing out.